emotional cravings are always underscored. They're always foundationally innocent. Well, Isaac, if I'm supposed to follow the cravings of my heart, then what do I do when those cravings make me do something sinful? So let's take an example. If I have an emotional craving for chocolate cake, I can experience this whoosh and create this fantasy of this chocolate cake will bring me so much gratification. But if I have an emotional dependency on the chocolate cake, now we're talking about something different. We're talking about a coping mechanism that could be full of shame. And what we've done is we've worked backwards. Instead of my emotional craving drove me to satisfaction, we say the behavior that I'm picking must mean that my emotional craving is dirty. So when our behavior is shameful, we're actually going to think that our emotional craving is shameful as well. And one of my favorite scriptures, at least pertaining to this topic, is Galatians 5:16 through 18, where Paul says, "But I say, walk by the Spirit, and do not gratify the desires of the flesh." He's already kind of separating the human experience between spirit and flesh. And I think in our Christian culture, we almost experience a split as though the spirit is somehow kind of whispering in one ear, but the flesh is driving this thing forward. I'm going to undo that a little bit, but let's continue on. For the desires of the flesh are against the spirit, and the desire of the spirit are against the flesh. So now Paul is creating a conflict. He's describing this spirit whispering in our ear and this rumbling flesh as though they're in conflict. He continues on to say, "For these are opposite to each other, to prevent you from doing what you would." I think, though, that when we consider the innocence of all emotional cravings, kind of stemming from last week, we have to deconstruct the distortion. We have to extract the distortion away from the innocent emotional craving so that we can get back to its innocence. And I think the innocence is the spirit. Let me explain a little bit more. When we live in the cycle of shame, what happens is we say, this craving makes me do this dirty thing. This craving makes me do this dirty thing. And now the craving actually begins to look like the desire. Or the behavior, and all we say is, I crave to do this thing, I crave to do this thing, I crave to do this thing, and now we're saying this part of me is dirty, damaged, and disgusting. But when we deconstruct, in other words, when we get back to the mindset of the spirit, what we're literally doing is we're pulling out the behavior and remembering the innocence of that emotional craving. When we recognize that this thing is incredibly valuable, now we pair with it that new behavior that actually matches. It correlates in value, my desire to feel powerful, my desire to feel like I belong and I'm valuable. And if I'm following these desires out of the innocence, out of the spirit, the mindset of the spirit, now I'm completing and perfecting God's plan for my life. So instead of combining your emotional craving with these shaming behaviors, let's begin taking away the behavior and returning back to the innocence so that we can understand the mindset of the Spirit.